just among fun. Military science fiction podcast. Books or stories every Wednesday. Military science fiction podcast. Discussion, interviews, reviews, and rants. Military science fiction podcast.
Welcome to the Military Science Fiction Podcast. I'm your host, Jeffrey H. Haskell, and this is your other host, Rick Partlow. Between us, we have authored over 120 novels, full length, and, short stories and novellas and whatnot.
Countless short stories.
Countless. Oh, I can count mine, actually. They're not countless. I don't like doing short stories, so I know all the ones I've done. And James is not going to be with us today, but he has also authored many books, and today we're going to be talking about spaceship technology. Not
I
just
want
like
to list the other people who won't be with us today who have authored many books.
Yeah, lots of people have authored many books.
And they all won't be with us today.
They all won't be with us today, though I don't personally know anybody who's authored more books than you.
I do.
Who?
Kevin J. Anderson.
I don't really know him though.
Well, we're not like close friends, but I've talked to him several times at
That's
cons,
true.
so-
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, Kevin
So
Kevin J is a special case.
He records his books via narration while he hikes in the Colorado Rockies, which is my dream, but I can't do narration.
Yeah, I keep trying to figure that out myself. But we're not talking about narration today or recording books via talking or whatever you want to call it, because that's not writing, that's talking, which you think I'd be good at, but no, I can't ever seem to make it work. Today we're going to be talking about spaceship technology in the future, different time periods, what it might entail, besides just the pew-pews and the defensive technology. Like, what would life aboard ship be like? Would it be extended? Would it be, what kind of food and water and logistics would they have? What other pieces of technology might they have to make life easier on board ship?
And like almost everything we talk about with technology, it depends.
Everything depends, right? It depends. The sci-fi in general
Like the astronauts today, where it depends.
Yeah. They do, don't they?
Yes, they do.
So it all depends. And so we'll set some rough time frames, like the first one being like 300 years in the future. You've got some form of interplanetary travel, within our own system, barring some alien intervention or discovery of some new technology. Probably won't have extra solar system, travel on a regular basis.
Well, why are we borrowing new technology?
No, not new technology, alien technology.
No. I think in 300 years, it's very possible we'll have faster than light travel.
You think we'll have the warp drive figured out by then?
Something we may not even know now. It's too long in the future to, 300 years ago was the early 1700s. I mean, we barely had electricity at all. I mean, there was like experiments with it, but we didn't have any idea what it was or what it did. We didn't have antibiotics. I don't think we had steam travel yet. We didn't have steam
the rudimentary steam engines, but I'm not sure.
You could form a rudimentary lathe. Sorry, that's a Galaxy Quest quote.
Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that.
Hopefully they do, but you never know. It's so long ago. It's so far in the future. People don't understand. When I read books or watch movies that take place 1,000 years in the future, for instance, and I look at them and I say, that doesn't look different enough.
Well, there's a line between I'm going to make it completely unrecognizable and it has to be relatable to today, and depending on what you're writing or what your goal is, it would be fairly easy to make it somewhat unrecognizable and wildly different. If your goal is to showcase the differences between now and the future and the different, the differences in technology, because you have all kinds of stuff, especially if you end up going, like if you went the Star Trek route and you had transporter technology and you had warp drives, and I mean life would be unrecognizable. Most science fiction, I feel like there isn't enough um, technology focus on technology that isn't weapons and space travel. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
the
Well,
how would you cook your food in the future?
a
You
great example
know?
of that is, and I love the books, don't get me wrong, but there's a writer named Clifford D. Simak who wrote back between the 50s and the 70s. I think he died in the 80s or 90s, but a lot of his books sounded a lot like they took place in the 50s and 60s, even when they were thousands of years in the future. And I like to think that maybe the future histories that he wrote allowed for reasons for this, but it was very, very obvious that it was the 50s. Even in a book that he wrote that was supposed to take place in the late 60s, it was the 50s.
I feel like for the most part, like talking about the 50s, Starship Troopers for the most part, other than the fact that it was set in 1999, felt somewhat timeless. I didn't feel like there was a lot of 60s slang and lingo and, you know, ideas in it. Though I wasn't alive in the 60s, so I couldn't really 100%
Starship,
do that.
the Starship Troopers wasn't written in the 60s, was it?
It was written in 1957 or 58.
Yeah, I thought it was the 50s.
But I mean, like I meant 50s. Sorry, I said 60s, but I meant 50s. I feel like I felt like it was somewhat neutral.
Yeah.
I feel like outside of Hollywood, the 50s was somewhat of a neutral decade. There wasn't a lot of, unrecognizable slang that you could use that would date your book. Now, I'm writing a book series right now where I am purposely trying to make it feel both advanced and frontierish because the main character is from a frontier planet, so he has really throwback language, sort of frontier language,
Yeah.
and everybody else speaks more of a modern full.
Well, that's the way I get around that restriction in a lot of books is they have the main character be from somewhere out in the boonies where all this new stuff hasn't reached yet. So he can see all that stuff, but he can also be a window for the reader, who
Yeah.
lives in the modern day. But we're getting kind of far afield from the
Yeah,
topic here. But yeah,
but I mean, it is in a sense, it is we are grounded in the time that we're writing these books to some degree. You and I have noted a lot that we have very without collaboration or speaking on it or discussing it beforehand, have arrived at the same conclusion for technology in a lot of instances. The I think that I think there will be advances that we can't foresee. And there's, they call them singularities, right? Cell
yeah,
phone singularity, the transistors are singularity, cars are singularity. Life
black swan
before,
events.
yeah, life after it is unrecognizable to people who were born before it. And, my dad, who's 83 years old, is just absolutely in love with AI. He thinks it's the solution to everything. And it's just, oh, Jeffrey, it's just so good. And I'm just like, that's because you don't understand it. But and I loathe and long for the day when my kids come to me with something and I'm just like, I have no friggin' what is this? And it happens every couple of decades. Something will happen that will change the way we live society, and you can't foresee it. There was a book written in the 70s that was really famous because it was it the population collapse or whatever? It was the presidential science advisor for the
Population bomb.
yeah, talking about how by 1990 half the world's population was going to be dead and the rest were going to be starving and there'd be droughts and blah 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 and doomer stuff and none of it happened because technology changed and the ideas changed and research changed.
That was a big thing. If you read um, like science fiction writers of the 80s and early 90s, uh, they're talking about like these doom and gloomers who say we're going to run out of food, we're going to run out of room, and all sort of stuff. And they were, and these science fiction writers even were talking about, well, we'll be able to grow food in the ocean. Or we didn't need any of that.
No
All we needed was some better
distribution.
pesticides and fertilizer. And
Well, a funny
it's
thing is a lot of people's ideas are formed based on very small data sets, and and it becomes their whole shtick. Like sometimes you'll read science fiction authors, and no matter what book they're writing, they're talking about global warming, or they're talking about social change, or they're talking about this, or they're talking about that. And I'm sure I probably do something like that, but I try really hard to be science based, and and not apply very local problems to this time period to the future.
Well, and the other thing about that, you're talking about global warming. Okay, it warms up in the future. These science fiction writers make the mistake of thinking the future is going to be a single point focus. Like everything's going to be about it's warmer now. No, they'll just get used to it. And if people have to move out of like certain Gulf countries or like Arabian countries because it's too hot, nobody's going to think about that. Nobody's going to think about the fact that there used to be a country there. It's going to
Yeah.
be just something that's in the background, and nobody's going to even consider it.
Yeah, it always annoys me whenever I'm reading a book and it's set in the future, usually far in the future, and there's constant references to the modern era.
Yeah, yeah.
I try really hard to avoid that with Grimm. It's 1,000 years in the future, but I actually purposely made it try to feel like it was the 1940s, really, in a lot of ways. Um, but at no time does he talk about, well, there was this 21st century, writer, or there was this old,
Named Jeff Haskell.
yeah, this old movie that not that he doesn't talk about the past sometimes, because history is important, and not that there aren't historians and stuff like that, but I always try to reference universal time periods like, well, Napoleon, or whoever, something,
or,
nothing,
or the Roman Empire or something like
Roman
that.
Empire, or during World War II, during one of the Great Wars. I would never say World War II, but like during one of the Great Wars of old Earth, there was this thing. And because really a lot of being tactically and strategic smart is just reading history and reading what other generals and admirals and captains have done in the past, so that you can
Mhm.
apply it to what you're doing in the future. And so, yeah, I always try to avoid that. I try to avoid anything that tells people, oh, he must have written this book, in 2023 because this thing happened, and that happened, and that influenced everybody. Um,
Did anything in
I know
2023
somebody,
influence everybody?
I know somebody said, I saw a review where somebody said, I'm reading this book, and I keep waiting for COVID to happen, and it's very frustrating because the book is set in 2020 and there's no mention of COVID. And the author was like, yeah, I wrote it in 2018. you know, like,
Yeah.
whoops. And there's some danger there with near future stuff too. Wow, we're not even remotely talking about technology now. So,
So, getting back to spaceships, I think that if we want to talk about spaceship technology, we're going to have two tracks. One track is where there's faster than light travel,
five
and
people,
the other track is
one
where
person.
there's not. So, because if there's faster than light travel,
Yeah,
um,
let's just make it easy. Let's talk about if there's fast and light travel, because
all
that's
right,
just more interesting and more relevant to us.
it's
Because
very much more interesting because if there's not faster than light travel, then whether it's 300 years in the future or 1,000 years in the
it doesn't really
future,
matter.
pretty much it's going to be the same.
Yeah, and
Maybe faster, but
and funny enough, it'll be the same a lot of how it is today, just crossing the ocean, because you wouldn't need long term, you know, people living aboard ships, because they'd always be going from one planet to another. They wouldn't be going like, oh, I'm going to go on a deep space mission and survive out by Jupiter for
I
7 years.
mean, at some point it could get to. I mean, I read about this idea the guy had. It's called laser assisted interstellar ramjets, layers for
Shoot a
short.
laser at a solar sail, and
No, it's you an interstellar ramjet, but instead of being powered by a giant fusion reactor, you you gather up the interstellar medium, and a laser being shown from the star system powers it. It heats up that interstellar medium and uses that as a propulsion. And the cool thing about it is it's much more efficient if you're sailing into the laser beam. So if you built like a bunch of Federation star bases at the edge of a bunch of star systems with habitable planets, you could have these interstellar ramjets sailing up the laser beam into these star systems, and it would be much more efficient
Kind of
and a
like a
lot
train.
faster, huh?
It'd be kind of like a train
It
because
would be. I mean, and for the outside world relative to you, it would still take you 20 years or 30 years or whatever to get there. But for you, you'd be going at relativistic speeds, and it would be, maybe 4 years or 5 years or whatever, and you might be frozen or suspended animation or whatever. And that would be a much different kind of society where time didn't mean anything. And it might get to the point where social norms like the what am I talking like trends and fads and things like that didn't change as much as they do now, because you'd have a constant influx of people who were from decades ago, coming into your society. You want to keep it as close to that as possible. So you might have like a society that's stagnant on a I don't know the word I'm trying to figure out. Not not
culture.
so culture, yeah, on a cultural level, which would be like a thing I was talking about Clifford Smack. Everything is the 50s everywhere because people have agreed this is how we're going to stay.
It'd be funny is you could be heading for the frontier, and then when you get there, oh, they built 15 lasers after that. By the time you got
Maybe.
there.
Well, I mean,
You
I doubt it, because going into the laser is the fastest way to get there. If you're the one putting the first laser there, it's going
No,
to
no, I mean
take you
like
longer to.
you could be leaving Earth, and there could be say 15 lasers between you and your target, and that
Yeah,
15th laser is the furthest that we are.
yeah.
But by the time you get there, they've built 10
Oh,
more.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, and so you're no longer on the frontier because it's been 100 years for the observable
And,
galaxy.
and and the guy who wrote this wrote it back in a time where he was thinking of people in ramjets going to different systems and building the laser. But with nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, you could send
Just
a
shoot probes.
package like a nanotech factory as a laser sail and shoot it from your planet and get it there, and it could start building lasers, without a huge investment in people and time.
A lot of what they're gonna have to do with Mars, if they ever eventually want to die there, is send stuff ahead of time to
Yeah.
see, you know, so that there's equipment already up and running when they get there.
Um, yeah, I read what you said about Mars, and the question of whether we ever have colonies on Mars is going to depend a lot on, in this next 300 years we're talking about, if we have any inkling that there are nearby habitable planets and other star systems, and if we develop ways to get there faster. Because if there are habitable planets and other star systems, nobody's going to waste time building a colony on Mars.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if there's not, if everything we have everywhere is going to be unlivable, maybe they do. Maybe they make Mars more livable.
Well, and most of what I say about Mars is relevant to the immediate time period because that's what people are talking about. Like, oh, we'll be on Mars in 5 years. No, you'll be dying on Mars in 5 years. You're not going to be living on Mars. But in 20 years, who knows? In 30 years, who knows? Maybe there'll be something will happen that we'll find a way
And
to,
and that it
you
also
know,
begs another question, because you can, if you have access to the asteroid belt, you can build cities in space that are
yeah.
very comfortable to live in, very secure, uh, and there's no real reason to live on Mars.
Once we have a self-sustaining operable moon base, which is possible, it's a lot more possible than it is on Mars at this moment because we're closer. I mean, once you can build things on the moon and launch the moon, yes, the galaxies are our oyster. The hugest limit to our technology and our not our technology, the hugest limit to our exploration of our solar system is having to launch from our gravity well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you
Um,
can get in the asteroid belt and get the
yeah,
resources there, there's you can. I mean, people don't understand that if you are in the asteroid belt, you can build ships the size of cities, and it's not going to cost that much in time or manpower. I've talked about before. You take an asteroid that's round-ish, you build giant solar reflectors, which isn't, they don't have to be thick. They don't have to be really, expensive. Just all they got to do is reflect sunlight. You heat this thing up. You drill, once it's heated up a little bit to soften it, you drill through the middle. You inject water inside, and then you start spinning it. And you heat it up, and that, as it spins, that round shape is going to turn into a tube shape, like a cylinder. And that tube's going to be hollow because the water inside of it, as it heats, is going to expand. So you're going to wind up with however thick the metal was on the whole asteroid is going to be in an outer shell with a hollow in the middle where you can put engines and people and whatever, and you've got a starship right there, or a giant interplanetary spaceship that you made without having to haul metal from anywhere else.
Or a giant cargo ship.
Yeah, and it's childishly, it's not easy, but it's simple. The concept is simple. The process is very well understood. Building the stuff will take time and effort, obviously, but we know how it can be done. And if we come up with some point with some kind of interstellar, faster than light drive, it'd be childishly simple to build a starship that way.
Yeah, for sure.
Nobody's going to be. I mean, I see these movies where it's in the future and they're bringing starship components from Earth. I'm like, why would you bother?
Yeah, for sure. The why send once you've got the infrastructure in space, there's no point in bringing things up from Earth anymore. That's just an expense you don't need.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little about. I mean, we can talk about how people live in these ships in a second. I really find it interesting talking about the different ways that we actually could have star drives. In the simplest one, I mean, the one that's got the most writing about it, the most details that people have speculated about the most is what you were talking about, the Alcubierre space-time inflation drive.
The warp drive.
It's a warp, well, sort of.
Yeah, it's a space warp
It's
drive.
based on the concept that we can recreate the sort of inflation that expanded the universe at the moment of the Big Bang. For those who don't know, and I'm assuming everybody who listens to this knows, but the Big Bang's not an explosion, it's an expansion. It started off really, really small, like subatomic, and then space-time expanded like a balloon being blown up, except everything that exists is inside the skin of the balloon. It's not like the universe expands and there's like people floating around inside the balloon. No, you are in the skin of the balloon and you're getting farther away from every point on the balloon as it blows up. So whatever the effect was that caused that inflation, Alcubierre was was assuming we could figure out how to recreate that, and we could expand space-time on a very local and small level behind our starship, which would contract the space-time in front of it, which basically makes the fabric of space go faster than light while you never do.
You don't actually move.
You don't actually move at all.
Yeah.
So that's
It's
a
like
way to
floating
get
space
around.
almost, where
It's a way to get around
space is
Einstein.
yeah, it's like wormholes. Or
Not really wormholes.
no, not technically like wormholes. It's a way of getting around light speed,
Oh, yeah.
like wormholes. No,
And that's another one. Wormholes.
I've read
is
some
another
papers
one.
that say that wormholes actually may not be faster than light.
I don't believe that.
I nothing solid, but the theory is that it may take the same amount of time to go there through a wormhole that it would have normally, which I don't know.
Well, that
I-
makes
no.
no sense because if you have a wormhole, you are by necessity going outside of the fabric of this
Yeah.
universe. The speed of light is a speed limit that's cooked into the fabric of this universe. So there's no reason to assume going around outside the universe will take any time whatsoever, because time is also baked into the fabric of the universe. Time is not something. I mean, we don't know this obviously, but for everything we know, time is part of space. Time and matter,
Why they
and
call it space time,
yeah,
you know.
it's not like something that exists outside the universe where you can.
It's not an idea.
Yeah, it's not an idea. It's a physical property of the
Yeah.
universe. It's caused by the rules of the universe. So there's no reason to assume it's going to take any time at all.
Yeah. No time at all. The I, one of the things I really like about the warp drive idea is why I think it's probably I haven't written a book with a warp drive, though I want to, but I haven't written a book with warp drive just because I'm such a huge fan of Star Trek. I know people will be like, "Oh, you're just copying Star Trek," and I know that's a silly reason not to write something, but that's
I've
basically.
written several that use some variation on the
But you always call
Alcubierre.
them something else, right? The Alcubierre drive or the,
Well, I
you know,
mean, I never call it the Alcubierre drive. I call it like usually name after
I
the
swear
people.
you have one book where you call it the Alcubierre drive.
No,
No, wait, no,
I
that wasn't you. That was Black Fleet. Never mind, sorry.
no, but I do talk about like in Duty Honor Planet, that trilogy. It's based on the concepts that Alcubierre pioneered, but they named it after the guy who actually
Made it
created a
work.
way for it to work. It's called the Isolink star drive in that one.
One of the things I really like about it, and why I think it's most likely the thing that will happen is when Alcubierre first came up with it, first proposed the idea, it would simply only take all the energy in the known universe to make it work. And then somebody came along a few years later and refined it, and they're like, "Oh no, we'll just take all the energy in our galaxy to make it work." And then somebody else came along and refined it a little bit more. I'm like, "No, no, no, it simply take all the energy of our sun to make it work." And at some point, somebody's going to refine it to the point where it's like, no, 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 it'll just take all the energy that the Earth can produce for it to work. And eventually, and this is over the course of 30 years, mind you, that it's gone from
Yeah.
the energy of our
Well,
galaxy,
that's why I
our
say
universe.
300 years,
Yeah.
somebody's going to figure out something. And there's a lot of other ways to do it. I mean, people have invented a bunch of them, like a bunch of hyperspace style drives, but those are all based on nothing but supposition and
Unicorns and wishes.
plot devices.
Yeah.
But the ones that people have actually talked about, there's wormholes, as you said, which um, there's the possibility that natural wormholes exist that were created at the creation of the universe. If they do, they're probably microscopic, and you'd have to expand them and kind of line them with some kind of material to go through. Um,
Yeah.
and we don't know how to do that now. We have no idea. We don't even know if they exist. Um, which is why I don't use wormholes a lot. And when I do, they were created by some ancient alien race who had thousands of years to come up with it, because I think that's the furthest away possibility, is figuring out a way to expand a wormhole.
If you like wormholes, may I suggest you read Against All Odds? Because there is a wormhole in it. Though
There
it's
you go.
not, they do use it now and again, but it's static and it goes from one place to another, and it's not like part of their drive or something. But it's pretty interesting. I really like writing. I really did a lot of research on it, did a big deep dive on it, and I really liked coming up with the ideas and the way it worked and how it would look. And it's really interesting is one of the theories about wormholes is when you're inside it, you'd be able to see out into the galaxy, but the galaxy you saw would not be the galaxy you recognize. It would be wildly different because the
Interesting.
compression of light into the wormhole you would be seeing galaxies from billions of light years away that you wouldn't see from here. So I thought that was interesting. The Yeah, and you could do wormholes, you could do space folds. I do think though most likely, and there's other drives. There's actually you could do constant acceleration drives. One of the things I liked about Project Hail Mary was that they basically just accelerated under 3 Gs for
Yeah, but
7.5 years.
that is slower than light, so that's going
It
to
is
take you
slower than
years.
light, but I mean, like, it's slower than light, but it's faster than a lot of people
Right.
realize.
Well, I mean, that's there's also drives that, or I mean, I think this one got debunked, but if the M drive had existed, uh,
It
that would
didn't
have
get
been
debunked. They just weren't able to um,
reproduce it.
make it work on the scale. I think that that they thought it would.
But if it exists, and there's still a possibility it could exist, that
Yeah.
would be a reactionless drive that you could. It might not be faster than light, but it would get you anywhere you wanted to go if you had long enough.
And the
Um,
neat thing too is an idea I touch on this on my books. I don't know how much you get into relativity on your books, if at all.
well, it depends on whether or not they are using a faster than light drive, or if they have wormholes and they're going really fast between them. Sometimes relativity rears its ugly head.
But I did there's a space-time calculator you can get. There's several of them. There's some good ones. And because I have my guys flying around the system at, 20,000 kps and they're constantly accelerating and decelerating and moving very quickly, not the speed of light or anywhere near the speed of light, because they have a faster than light travel between systems, but not in systems. And I was looking at the relativity. I'm like, oh, they could travel at this speed forever, and it would be like 8 minute difference. Oh, okay. And that was the thing I liked about Project Hail Mary is he actually used the relativity calculator to show that yeah, it was 7 years for him, but it wasn't like 100 years for everybody else. It was just 12 years.
Yeah.
So it was so like you could do a thing where it's like, hey, you're going to accelerate it at 6 Gs for 7 years, and then decelerate at 6 Gs for 7 years, and you'll get there pretty quick in a galactic scale, not in like a human scale.
And there's other ideas that have to do with gravity, like we were talking about Paths of the Fury, where Weber used the idea of creating
Black
a
holes.
small temporary singularity in front of your ship that not only drags you along faster than light, but it also shields you from everything because nobody can shoot you through a black hole.
And an Alcubierre drive would do that too in a lot of sense
Yeah,
because its time in front of the ship would be,
yeah, distorted.
yeah, you wouldn't be able. There'd be no.
That was a big plot point in the Duty on Our Planet trilogy was them trying to figure out how to because they didn't and when the book starts there is no alien enemy with starships. There's some raiders in systems who pirate people and they have weapons to deal with them, but there's nobody else that has the Icelink star drive. So when they actually meet somebody that does, trying to figure out a way to actually shoot at each other was a big part of the book. Um,
Yeah, and I know I've read some stuff that says that you like while you're traveling through space-time, all the radiation and matter that you pass through or that passes through you would accumulate on the front of the ship. And so that when you came out when you shut the drive off, basically all that stuff would continue going forward, and destroy everything in its path. I thought that would be kind of an interesting thing to do as a weapon. Unintended,
well, you'd have to do some. What you would have to do is shut the drive off periodically through your trip so that you shed all that.
yeah, because you
Um,
wouldn't roll into a solar system and be like, well, there were planets here when we left.
you would like you know a quarter of the way there you shut your drive down for just a few seconds. Quarter of the way, so you don't accumulate
Yeah.
as much radiation. And I'm sure when you get into interstellar medium, the stuff you accumulate is going to thin out quite a bit. Um,
Well, we're in a what they call it a hot zone here. Um, there's like we're actually in a really sparsely populated part of the galaxy. Um, and in other parts of the galaxy, the interstellar medium may be more thicker, full of stuff.
yeah.
Here, we're in a really Earth is in a really odd place that is does not have a lot around it. So no
Another idea
drives.
that I heard about that I find interesting. I don't know if it has any real physics backing or not, but it's an idea that based on something that we haven't found yet. So there you go. But we are constantly trying to detect gravitons,
Hmm.
and we know they must exist somewhere, somehow, because everything else that is a wave is also a particle. Like there's light waves and there's also photons. Um, so since gravity exists as a wave, it must have a particle, must have the graviton somewhere. But from all that we can tell, it doesn't exist in are dimensions. So the theory is if it exists in other dimensions, like higher dimensions, if you can create gravitons, like in a big particle accelerator, you could use them to travel in other dimensions faster than light. Um, so basically, your ship would have a giant particle accelerator around it. So, which brings to mind all kinds of really cool design ideas. Cause like you could have like a ship and then like rings around it, that are attached to it with the particle accelerator, or it could be a flying saucer looking thing with the ring on the outside. So it brings to mind all kinds of really cool designs.
That could be
Uh,
pretty cool. Yeah.
so, I mean, that's another, and how that works with respect to how fast you can go is going to be different than any of the rest. And that's the one thing I want to get into when we were talking about what the traveling would be like. Well, if you have a wormhole you're going through and you have to travel all the way through the solar system between wormholes, and you don't have any kind of artificial, you don't have like gravity generator, you just have wormholes. Well, then your ship is going to be a lot like an interplanetary ship that we were talking about.
Yeah.
You're going to have some way of generating gravity through rotation, or counting on, if you have efficient enough fuel, maybe constant acceleration and deceleration. You're going to have shielding against cosmic rays and solar radiation, because you're going to be out in space for a long time between wormholes.
Yeah.
So
Also,
you're
there's even with artificial gravity, they have found that it's not as effective at maintaining muscle mass and a lot of other stuff as
They have
regular
not found
gravity.
that because they've never been able to try artificial
Well,
gravity.
in what they have found based on what they found on the International Space Station with doing all the workouts and everything like that,
No, but that's not
there's
artificial
a
gravity.
degradation.
I'm talking
Well,
about rotational gravity. I mean, they've never tried that.
you mean like centrifugal force gravity? Oh,
Yeah.
okay, sorry, I was thinking something else.
No.
At
That's
the
I'm talking
time.
about. And I've heard people argue about whether it's centrifugal or centripetal.
Those are two different things.
I know, but I've heard people argue about which it would be. I don't know.
I
I've
think
always heard
well, I think
centrifugal force.
cool. What is it? I think colloquially it's the same thing, but I mean like there is a
Yeah.
scientific difference.
I don't really know which is
But
accurate for this. But anyway, you're spinning something around to
yeah,
create
you're walking around
rotational
the inside of
gravity.
it. Yeah, sorry.
And I've heard like idiots on TV saying, well, if you have it too small, then it's going to do this and that. And it's like, yeah, and people, there's going to be like a kind
Well,
of
the
a,
smaller it is, the faster it has to
yeah,
spin.
and there's going to be a Coriolis effect. It's like, well, people will take this stuff into account. It's not like
Yeah,
people don't know this. There's going to be ways to get around that. And you saying, oh, they can't do centrifugal force because there's going to be Coriolis effect. Well, they'll build it bigger.
you know, there's
They'll build it so it extends out, and you spin it and have it further away from the body of the ship. They're not gonna give up on it because you point out a weakness in it.
yeah. So the P-38 Lightning, right? It had two engines, and what they
Mhm.
found is when both engines were spinning the same direction, it caused the plane to be almost unflyable.
Yeah.
But when they spun both engines in the opposite directions, the plane ripped apart. And so they had to find a way to make it so that it wouldn't rip apart and it wouldn't be unflyable. And they did. And they came up with the best fighter, one of the best fighters that ever existed at low
Yep.
altitudes. So,
And they're gonna figure something out.
yeah.
Um,
One thing you could do is, it would be really interesting, is if you could have two rings and the rings would be spinning in the opposite directions.
yeah.
And that would balance a lot of the
There's a
problems.
lot of you
Yeah.
could have like two like you could have the ship have two habitational pods that extend out on cables from the
Yeah.
center, and they
And
just go as far as they need to swing around and give you gravity without noticeable Coriolis effect.
yeah. And
You know,
also they would counter if they weighed exactly the same, they'd offset each
they
other.
counterweight each other. Yeah,
Yeah, and you wouldn't have any problems.
there's a
The
lot of different
biggest
ways to
problem
do it,
would
and
be
I hate these people that come on there and say, "Oh well, there's this problem with it." It's like, yeah, so what? We'll
Okay,
figure it out.
never heard that one before.
Yeah.
It's
Um,
like the people who've never read sci-fi talking about sci-fi, and I'm just like, yeah, I read that book. I read a book about that too in 19, that was written in 1930 something. We've come a long way since then.
it's like
What if,
you know,
Rick?
it's like
What if? Hear me out, Rick. What if we had a sci-fi book with people in armor that had energy in it? You know,
yeah. But no, I watch these shows sometimes, and they'll bring up stuff like you were bringing up, like with the warp drive. It's going to build up all this stuff, so it'd be impossible to fly in the system. Well, and I just came up
no,
with
I
an
didn't say
idea.
that.
I just can't. I know you didn't say that, but that's why I watch guys in the
But,
podcast say that, I come up with an idea in my head watching the show to solve that problem in like
yeah,
10 seconds.
you turn the warp drive off when you're around nothing. Yeah,
Yeah,
problem solved.
it's not that difficult to figure out, and I don't know why their imaginations are so limited they can't think of it. Um,
Well, if they had imaginations like ours, they would be writers.
some of them say they are, um,
Yeah, a lot of people say they are.
but I mean, like I said, if you have a drive that if you have wormholes, that's how you're going to have to travel. If you have a warp drive, um, we don't know what the gravitational effects of being inside that space-time inflation will
Yeah,
be. So we don't know what's going to happen as
to the
far as
people.
your ship's gravity if you're inside that inflation bubble. God only knows. That it's going to come with experiments. I prefer in my books to have artificial gravity because it works well as a dramatic device. Like you can't have somebody, striding out of a room or stalking out of a room or shrugging their shoulders or leaning up against the wall if there's no gravity.
I am never, ever writing anything without gravity ever again. That was painful.
I've done it, and it's a pain in the butt.
Oh
You
yeah.
always constantly have to remind everybody, including yourself, oh, he
Well, he
people
couldn't
don't
do that.
people don't shrug in free fall
Yeah.
because if you shrug, you go up into the air, and
Yeah.
if you're like on magnetic boots or boots that attach you to the floor, like with Velcro or something, you have to change the way you walk, and you don't lean against anything. You don't slouch. You're basically like one of those blow up
You're
figures that
floating
they
in the
have
ocean,
at the tire places that are like
Yeah.
like this. You have to control your momentum, and you have to find a way to make it all go down into your leg. It's very very complicated,
Yeah.
and I don't like writing about it.
Me either. I'm not ever doing that again. Not that nor I'll do vacuum stuff occasionally, but I'm never writing an extended scene where there's no gravity and no
Oh
vacuum.
yeah.
They're all in suits and just it was awful. You can't hear anything, you can't see anything. It's
When I was writing Wholesale Slaughter, they start out with wormholes, and they have acceleration that they have pretty efficient fusion drives that give them constant acceleration and deceleration between the wormholes, which solves that problem. But then I came up with this warp drive that they developed, and initially they didn't know how to make gravity with it. So everybody in this warp drive ships were miserable all the time because they didn't have gravity and they couldn't eat regular food. And it wasn't until like a couple books later that the resident genius figured out a way to use the warp drive to make gravity. And everybody was like incredibly grateful to him. It's like, I need a steak again.
one of the things I did with Against All Odds with Grimm's War was is figure out a way to do artificial gravity and have it be in a way that made sense because I didn't want to deal with that. I didn't want to
Yeah.
deal with half gravities. I didn't want to deal with like, oh, we're accelerating at 6 Gs now. Everybody lay down and get in your couches and take your medicine and like they do in The Expanse where the pilots all get
Yeah.
juiced up.
Yeah.
I just
I've done that a lot. And actually in the Ice-Link star drive, we're talking about we don't know what's going to happen with gravity. In that one, I postulated that gravity built up in a different dimension as the more you expanded space-time and inflated it. And you get to a certain point where the expansion is taking you at a certain speed relative to the universe, and that gravity starts to feed back into our dimension. and you have to, if you want to get like between star systems as fast as you can, you have to go into something called G sleep, where you're in a oxygenated fluid that fills your lungs and cushions you. And if you're awake in a battle, then you have to deal with really heavy G's for brief periods of time. But yeah, I mean, that was easier to deal with than the books were like Holy War, where they have wormholes or wholesale slaughter, because then you have to have people who are just like being crushed and can't and some of them can deal with higher G's than the others, and some people are going to die if you go to high G for too long. It's a real pain in the butt having to keep track of all that.
Yeah, for sure. And ke- if the point of the story is you're highlighting that, then great. But otherwise, it ends up becoming almost a drag on the story.
Yeah.
Um, the one of the I have this story idea I want to do is has to do with full space fold technology,
Mm-hmm.
which a lot of people talk about like, oh, you're folding space or whatever. You're going from here to there. But my idea more was like space-time, if you kind of imagine space-time as an ocean that exists outside of our universe, but it's an ocean of space-time that exists at every point of every when and everywhere in the universe. You could theoretically enter space-time anywhere and exit anywhere without having to move ever.
Yeah.
And so one of the ideas I had is that the only way to find anything in space-time is via gravity, right? So you couldn't just enter space-time around Earth and exit space-time in the middle of nowhere. You had to exit near a gravity well. And so you could only move from planet to planet. You can't move anywhere else. There's no interstellar travel, so to speak. And so my idea
Right.
for this book series that I want to write at some point is that they have these massive starships that are basically just you know flying um militaries. They have ground forces and naval forces, and they have you know orbital forces, everything you need to fight a war in one ship. So the ship would appear in orbit, it would deploy landing craft, it would deploy orbital defenses, it would deploy ships to defend it,
Kind of Dune like.
kind of doing like, yeah, that's actually part of my thinking was that. Um, and while they did sort of like the spice control spacefold thing with some sort of magical navigation aid.
Mhm.
The My idea more was like you identify your target where you're going via the very unique gravity well that exists around every planet. And part of the idea too is that because these ships were so expensive to make and so incredibly difficult to manufacture, that there was a agreement between nations that they wouldn't destroy those ships. That it was you destroy all the people, and you can fight the fighters, and because you can have fighters at that point because you're in orbit, and the other ships, but you leave the mothership alone. You don't attack that. Anyways,
It's sort of a BattleTech kind of thing.
yeah, and the exactly that. Yeah, you don't attack drop ships, and then or jump ships, and then the idea is that the the main character was the captain of one of these ships, and I think basically gets asked to glass a planet full of civilians, and it's beyond the pale for him, and he ends up fighting a war against his own country to with his giant ship. Anyways, that's a little off topic, but I like the idea of spacefold and moving through space time.
Well, you remember what's his name? Peter F. Hamilton. He wrote
Yeah,
a two-book series where somebody came up with a kind of a gateway, a way to open gateways between worlds, and now everybody travels like on trains through those gateways to the other
yeah,
worlds.
that was really cool. I remember.
And,
What was the name of that book series?
and they probably no they didn't have any concept of space battles, so they didn't have like spaceships, armed navies or anything. And then they get attacked by an alien, and they have to
Figure that
revive
out.
a way to
Yeah, because
travel
that would be
with
another
the
thing
ship.
too. Is if you had let's say we came up with a Stargate like system, and we could build Stargates. How will we get it to another planet? Well, you put it in a rocket and you shoot it, you know, and if you build it right, the rocket can accelerate for a long time and then land on that planet. And like you said, nano fabricators and everything could deploy the Stargate, and you could go through and you'd be on the other planet, and you could just rinse and repeat. You know, deploying that to whatever, wherever, and whenever you wanted to go planet wise. And you could then, at that point, once you had that sort of Stargate like network up, you could deploy trains, and you never even have to develop space technology beyond just the rockets
Yeah.
you need to shoot them.
I read this idea. This was not in a science fiction book. It was speculative, but um, I don't know if people know it, but it is possible to build a time machine. It's a closed time-like loop. Well, theoretically, I should say. And the way to do it, though, is you have to do like a neutron star that's going at relativistic speeds, going around another neutron star. Anyway, um, the point is you can only travel back in time to the point when the time machine was made. You can't go any further back than that. It's a closed time-like loop. It's not magic. Movie Primer is built on this idea that you can only go back in time to the point where the time machine was invented.
Which
And
one was Primer?
it was an
Oh,
independent
is
film.
that the box? Is
Yeah,
it the box? Yeah,
yeah.
that was a cool.
Uh,
I haven't seen that, but I read it was
so
really cool.
the idea somebody came up with is you have to have relativistic travel, you know, sometime a really fast relativistic travel. You build this time machine, and then you go wherever you want in the universe, and it'll take you millennia or centuries or millennia or whatever, tens of thousands of years, objectively. But for you, subjectively, going near the speed of light, it won't take as long. And you do all this exploring. Then you come back to the time machine and you go back in time to a spot where you can go home and get there just after you left.
That's cool. That'd be a neat idea. Kind of like a rubber band. No
Yeah.
matter how far you go, it eventually will snap you back. Um, and
And you could go millions of years in the future, exploring the entire galaxy or another galaxy or whatever. And then you come back to where that time machine is, and it takes you back to say it's 100 light years from wherever your home is. It takes you back to 100 year, like 99 years before you left. And then you travel home and you get there a year after you left or a few months after you left or something,
that's
just so
crazy.
you won't
That'd be
run into
cool.
yourself.
Yeah, that's crazy. I like that idea. That'd be neat, especially if you could harness it in such a way that would be like, okay, you have to go back to this time. It's not like you can go back to any time after it was built. You have to go back to when it was built. So
Why would
you,
you do that?
I'm just saying, story wise, story
Oh,
convention wise, it would be interesting.
I would think that you'd be restricted by law to only going back to where you would not meet yourself
Yeah,
because they
so
can't
after
have
you've left.
duplicates of you running around.
Heaven forbid, men have hobbies.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be pretty cool. That'd be a neat way to travel, um, explore and stuff like that, and then come back and be like, hey, look at all the stuff I found. Now we don't need to go there.
Pretty much.
And then you could always be exploring different planets and galaxies and whatnot, and then just always come back and be home in time for dinner.
It also makes interstellar war practical because if you go to another star system or you get like a transmission that says, we're not going to do this thing you want us to do, then you travel there and blow the crap out of them. Then you go back to your time machine and come back. So it's not like you have to have a suicide mission.
Yeah, Edge of Tomorrow is, where you just, you know, you
Well, no,
could
you can't relive your own life. You
yeah,
just don't have to give up on. You don't have to like give up on ever seeing your family or anything.
yeah. That's a pretty cool idea. I like that. I might have to do something with that someday.
And it would
Someday,
be a cool idea if,
maybe
if you if you screwed up and went back too far back. You know,
be like, oh no, yeah, or something happened that destroyed the time machine and you got stuck in the future.
yeah, yeah.
That would suck.
I'm not sure what could happen. It would have to be like a black hole or something hitting
Something,
it. Because I mean, we're talking two huge neutron stars orbiting around each other at relativistic speeds.
yeah,
Not a lot that can blow that up.
get hit with a black hole. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, you have an interesting thing with Ransom's Renegades coming out, the way their drives work. You were talking about possibly having one where it like flew through a sun to destroy it. What was that all about?
Did I? Their drive is basically like an Alcubierre style drive. I call it the metric. Um, yeah, I don't remember talking about flying through a sun to destroy it. Maybe I might have talked about that it's possible to use an Alcubierre drive to fly through a sun. I did not have intend to use that in that book, but now that you say it, it's
We were
interesting.
talking about covers, and we were talking about how it'd be cool if Becky did a cover where your ship was like flying through a sun, and you're like, oh, hey, yeah, maybe they could do that to destroy a sun, and
Oh, yeah. I haven't got that. As far as I'm writing the third book now, and I have no plans for sun destroying yet, but maybe in book 5 or 6, you never know.
yes, nothing like blowing up a sun. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's pretty cool. I mean, like, I like. We got a lot of. There's a lot of neat ideas you can do with space travel and fast and light travel. Enough
But
that.
well, and as far as like living on the ship, if you have a fast enough ship, you can have things like freezers and meat in your freezer and fresh vegetables. You know, but if you're on one of those things that takes months to get between systems, you might not have that.
The one of the things I deal with on the Interceptor is that they have to have logistics of food the way like U.S. submarines do, where they just they have stores obviously, but in order to carry enough food and equipment and resupply for a crew for an extended mission, like it ends up going everywhere. And, under people's bunks and in the rooms, and storage is premium. You don't just have wasted space on a ship. And actually, with Grim Resolve, which is book two, a huge plot point is the fact that they are out too long and they're running out of food because they don't have magical food replicators that just create food
Yeah.
from which
I
would solve
mean,
a lot of problems.
we were talking about. I was talking to Jeff Cheney about a new series he wants me to work on about this for exploration series. The thing about an exploration series is somebody's going to have to figure out a way to grow food. You know, you
Yeah.
can't go away from Earth that far into unknown space without some way to grow food on your ship.
Yeah, you've got to have some sort of hydroponics thing going on because if you're going to go exploring, you can't count on arriving on a planet and having there be food that you can eat there.
No, you don't know what's going to be there.
Yeah, probably nothing. Probably you'll visit 1,000 planets and one of them will be habitable, and maybe there'll be microbes there or something. Who knows?
You're not gonna. I mean, assuming you have that kind of technology, you're not going to visit 1,000 planets that are not habitable because you'll be able to see them
No,
via
ahead of
telescope and
time.
see if.
Well, okay, so that begs a question too. I really like the idea of like how like we have like really advanced computer technology
Mhm.
in some in biotechnology in some cases it's more advanced than other aspects of our technology. I think it'd be really cool if as a story anyways, if some alien race discovered some faster than light technology for their ships, but they're otherwise very non-advanced.
Oh, that's been that.
Yeah.
Harry Turtledove, I think, did that as the Road Not Taken was a short story where basically everybody else in the galaxy figured out the hyperdrive and artificial gravity, and it's really simple, and it's amazing we didn't discover it. So they're all stuck with things like muskets and 18th century technology. And when we get the star drive, it's like we mow through them with 20th, late 20th, early 21st century tanks and rifles and everything.
Yeah, I think that'd be a lot of fun to do, you know, where the technology, of the star drive is something that is just like, oh, everybody else figured that out, a
Yeah.
long time ago. And maybe not muskets, but one of the things about Hail Mary that bothered me was like I didn't understand how the Iridianites could not have known about radiation.
There's
Um,
no way you can build that drive without knowing about relativity and radiation. It's
yeah,
not
I
possible.
mean,
Um,
you know,
well,
well,
I had an idea, by the
see,
way. I think it would be really cool if you have that kind of Alcubierre style warp drive. That means you can twist space time, right? You can. So I came up with like a way to have effective laser weapons without huge mirrors
oh
because
yeah,
you use the actual fabric of space-time to focus the lasers. And also, if you build like at the edge of a solar system, you build one of these warp drives, you can you can create basically an incredibly powerful telescope using the fabric of space-time because we know gravitational lensing is a thing.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you can gravitationally lens with this drive, and you can see other galaxies, and you can see habitable planets from dozens of light years away.
Well, that'd be cool. That'd be cool. And if you kind of reverse that, like you were saying with lasers, and really chop
Yeah.
some stuff up. Well, that's a lot of really cool ideas. I think we've explored here today in our 5 minute talk on life aboard ship and our 45-minute talk about FTL, which clearly we like talking about more than anything else. The If you have any ideas for FTL or how it works or what interesting ideas that you've seen or read, please share us in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe
Or
and
go to
like
our
the book,
Discord. You can talk about it
or
there.
go on our Discord and ask. It's very active these days, more active than I can actually keep up with, unfortunately. So the more people, the better. And of course, the most important thing you can do is share the podcast on your socials, wherever you
Don't be like James and get rid of all your social media because we need you to share the
yeah.
podcast on your
Somebody
social.
has to have social media,
Yeah,
otherwise we
exactly.
don't grow. But most importantly, buy our books and share our books because that's what keeps us being able to do the podcast.
Yeah, because if
We
we can't
write
afford to
so that
write
we can do the
books, if
podcast.
we can't afford to write books, we're going to be too depressed to do this podcast.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, you guys have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us, and adios.
Arrivederci.
Auf Wiedersehen.